What is up, everybody? This is Rebecca Johnson of Supergirl Radio. We are about to get started to talk about Necessary Evil, Supervillains of DC Comics, which is a documentary that you can stream on Max. If you're a big fan of Max, like we are, that is where you can watch it. So hopefully you've done your homework, but if you haven't, you can still join us and share your thoughts about DC's big bads in the world of DC Comics. So that's who we're going to be talking about for this week's live and wired stream. And I see Morgan there backstage. Are you good to go? All right. Are you ready to talk to talk about the baddies of the world of DC and documentary filmmaking? I feel like has been a topic of conversation of late for us. So we'll be maybe critiquing it as a film as
big
well.
Doc fans over here.
So we'll be talking about it on multiple levels. This is mostly for our spooky season. This is kind of us having a spooky season episode. So I guess let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start talking about some villains.
McGurk! I love typing.
Not mess with my Google Docs, Meeksy.
Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira. I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is Lena Luthor, Boardroom or Ballroom, because her outfit,
She looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
No.
Helen Slater here. It's so fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
Welcome to Supergirl Radio, your source for all things related to the CW Supergirl TV series and the character of Kara Zor-El. My name is Rebecca Johnson.
I'm Morgan Glennon.
And we are live and wired on the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel and the Supergirl Radio Facebook page to discuss the documentary film Necessary Evil Supervillains of DC Comics. This is our attempt at a spooky season episode. It's about evil. It's about bad guys. That seems like an appropriate Halloween topic. And we've been checking out some documentary films as of late. So this is just another one that we're checking out on our favorite streaming platform, Max.com. So stream it on Max, as they say. So this is one that you can watch there. If you haven't watched it already, you can watch it on Max. And if you have, we hope you'll share your thoughts about your favorite DC Comics villains, because we definitely heard about them in this documentary. So let's get right to discussing Necessary Evil Supervillains of DC Comics, as narrated by Christopher Lee and directed by Scott Devine or Devine. I didn't get a chance to look up how to pronounce his name, but Scott Devine maybe, and J.M. Kinney. The film description from IMDb, and I'm pulling it from IMDb versus Max, because Max's description was kind of the one from IMDb was a lot better. So it says, quote, a documentary detailing the epic rogues gallery of DC Comics from the Joker and Lex Luthor, Sinestro, Darkseid, and more. This documentary will explore the supervillains of DC Comics, unquote. So I thought that was a better description than the Max one. So Morgan, my first question that I didn't put in the doc, but I kind of want to get your take on it, is this documentary film was pretty heavy on Batman and Green Lantern, I felt.
Yes. Yes, it was. So I will say the Batman, I expect it. If there's one thing I know that WB is always going to provide to me, always going to deliver for me, I know that it's Batman. I never question, will there be enough Batman in this thing? Because there will be. Arguably too much Batman sometimes, but
there's a quota.
Could there be such a thing? The Green Lantern I was surprised by. I was like, this guy again. So it's like people are trying to make me care about Green Lantern.
You're still not caring for him?
I honestly, some of the stuff that they were talking about with his villains, I was like, oh, that sounds juicy. But now I'm afraid that I might end up becoming a Sinestro fan, but not a Green. He has pathos.
He killed all the Guardians and really wanted them to know that he did not like them. So that was quite the part of it. So it was definitely heavy on Green Lantern, which I didn't expect either, but they definitely talked a lot about Green Lantern. They talked about a lot of different characters, but pretty heavy on Batman and Green Lantern. So if you are a Batman or Green Lantern fan, you're going to love this documentary. But I guess my other question outside of that is, so we watched the docu-series Superpowered, the Story of DC, which I guess that's what it was. But it was over a course of 3 episodes. Here, this was a documentary film.
It was.
So how do you think that this worked as a film?
Great question. About halfway through, I thought to myself, what is this that I'm watching? Because it does feel a little bit just kind of like a compilation of people going, remember Lex Luthor? That guy's bad. Captain Cold, a rogue.
Yes.
Cool. It's like you kind of get through and they're like, what is a villain? And then after they get it through, they're like, what is art? Then they go into just kind of listing villains and like what their deal is. And I just kind of thought, okay. But I kind of questioned like what the purpose of the documentary was, like who the audience for this was, because I feel like if you're kicking back and you're putting on a DC supervillain documentary, I think you probably know a bit about the DC villains. You're probably not going into it cold. And so I thought to myself, like, how many of the people like me are like, I don't care for Green Lantern and I don't need to know more. Like, I feel like the DC superfans are going to be like, yeah, I remember when that happened. Cool. I remember also when that happened. Cool. Like, I don't feel like I will say for the docuseries that we went through about the DC, the story behind it, it was going into stuff that happened in the 30s, the 40s. I think arguably you could be a pretty big DC fan, but not know that much about like the creators behind Batman or like the drama of like who created Batman, stuff like that.
Bob Kane and only Bob Kane.
Just Bob. For Bill. Or like, you know, how many wives / girlfriends did Wonder Woman's creator have? More than you'd think. Like, I think that stuff, like, you could kind of be a big Wonder Woman fan and maybe not know that full backstory, or, you know, Batman fan. But if you're a big Batman fan, you're probably pretty familiar with like all of his villains. So just kind of listing them and like what they're into, I was just kind of like, okay, this feels like very entry level documentary, which for me was great for the characters I'm not as familiar with, where I was like, oh, cool, I didn't know about that one. But for, you know, for some, I would assume for the average person putting on a documentary about DC comic characters, they're probably pretty familiar with most of these people. So like, yeah, I was a little confused about like who is the audience for this?
I think that's a great question, and I think that's a question that all filmmakers should be asking, especially documentary filmmakers
Who is this for?
who have to have a perspective on something. I think you're probably right. This is for people maybe interested in DC, but who don't know a lot or maybe minimal information about DC Comics. So maybe this is, if you want to learn more, maybe this is a good one. I think this also might be for people who are like me, who want to talk about the philosophy behind the characters and why they are the way they are. I think that is the aspect of the documentary film that I enjoyed the most, was the discussion about the dichotomy of, or even the dynamic of the hero and the villain, and why you need those archetypes and those characters to have a story. So I think those are maybe the two camps I would say that the audience is maybe for. But yeah, for like a hardcore DC Comics fan, you're probably not going to learn anything or take anything away. I think even for me, one of the interviewees was I forget her name, but she's the Arkham something podcast. What is that podcast called? I'm blanking on it. The Arkham Sessions.
I thought that was her, but they actually
what?
Yeah, I thought that was her, but they in the lower third. Oh, I think we might be unsynced, the audio.
Oh no. Okay. Let me try to go out and come back in. Stay where you are. Hang out with the chat. If there are some questions, answer the chat. I'll come back in. We'll try to reboot StreamYard and see if that helps. All right, hang on a second.
Let's try it. So like I was telling Rebecca, I thought that was the woman from the I think it's Arkham something podcast, but the lower third on the documentary, I think just put her up as like psychiatrist, which I thought was like, wait, doesn't she have a podcast as well? Did they have the podcast in her like little like crawl at the bottom? Because I thought to myself, I think that's who is one of the hosts of that podcast, but then I wasn't sure, and I don't think it said it.
I don't think so, but I think that's the same lady though. I think her name was Andrea.
Yeah,
and
like I
that's
immediately
Andrea Letamendi, if that's how you say that. I'm not really sure, but I thought that are we synced now?
I think
it better?
So.
Okay.
Yes, you can hear me, right?
yes. Sometimes the StreamYard, something goes buggy and you just have to go in and come back out, or go out and come back in. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, I think that's who that was. So that's who I assumed it was, because she talked a lot about Batman and the psychology, but around all of his rogues gallery. And she specifically referenced Batman the Animated Series, which is like her bread and butter, is the Batman the Animated Series with the Arkham Sessions. I highly recommend it if you're a big Batman fan and you like the in-depth discussion of those characters. The Arkham Sessions is a great podcast to check out.
And it looks like there are, because I just checked out their show page, and it looks like they are also doing some Star Trek stuff, which is cool. So if you're also a Star Trek fan, and you want to check out like the more recent episodes, they've been doing some of that stuff too. So
Yeah, I think she's an actual psychiatrist, psychologist,
I
something.
think
She's a professional in one of those fields.
Yeah, I think it said, I think her little like crawler on the bottom in this documentary said psychiatrist, but I immediately was like, I think she has a podcast. Like I don't know that it referenced that, but then again, I did almost forget that this documentary is from 2013.
Yes, it's a while ago. But I mention her because I've listened to a lot of those episodes and heard them talk about these different characters, and so a lot of that was kind of repeat for me about how, like, Catwoman is the, sort of the sexual desire for Batman, and then like the Riddler is his need to figure things out, and like a narcissistic part of Bruce Wayne, all these kind of things. Like all of his rogues gallery are kind of an aspect of Bruce Wayne. So I've heard a lot about that stuff, so a lot of that wasn't new for me. So I can see if somebody was like a big DC fan, it would be kind of like, yeah, I get it, I know. But it was neat, I think, for me to hear different writers and creators talk about the philosophy behind why you need a villain, what's important to have a villain in the story. And one of the things that I pulled away from this that I had not really thought about, because people talk about protagonists and antagonists all the time when they're talking about stories, but I think the documentary did a really good job of talking about what a protagonist is. And the definition from Alan Burnett, he says, if you define protagonist as somebody who sets something in motion and antagonist as somebody who stops him, almost all of the villains in comic books are protagonists. And I think sometimes when we talk about, and I say we as like a royal we, like we as a society. When we talk about protagonists, it's usually people put that on a hero.
Yeah, for sure.
And like to talk about antagonists as the bad guy or the villain. And so the way they talked about it in the documentary, I thought was a really interesting way to look at it, because really villains are the ones who set things in motion. They're the ones that get the story started. And so I thought that was something that I took away from it in particular. And I was curious, is there anything like that sort of popped out at you?
That was the one thing that like I thought was really cool about the concept that they were sort of introducing, is like, really, you can't have like a lot of the stories, the superhero stories are because of a villain doing XYZ, trying to take over a city, or trying to mind control everybody, or trying to R.I.P. Kelly, still not over it. And I think, yeah, like when you look at it that way, they are the ones creating the action that the heroes respond to. So in a lot of ways, if you're looking at a protagonist as the person who, creates the action in the story, they are really kind of the protagonists, because they're the ones who are getting things moving. Without like supervillains, we would just be watching the heroes like go about their day. We just watch Bruce Wayne talk to Alfred and like schedule dates with supermodels. Who wants to do that?
Wait, would you still watch that story?
Yes. but I would want it to be more like a Bachelor situation.
Oh yes.
But like all of like the things that they so I don't watch The Bachelor. This is not me being proud. I watched a lot of trash, just not that particular kind. But I would think that like a Bruce Wayne, The Bachelor situation would have like the challenges that the girls would do would get like increasingly insane. So they'd start with like normal stuff, and then the next thing you know, they're doing like the salmon ladders, and it's like Jessica
a gauntlet at the end.
Jessica, if you won't scale the building, how do you expect to get his love? She's like, I just thought he was normal billionaire. Jessica's crying as she's hand over handing up the building.
Jessica's gonna do it.
Jessica, you can do this.
So this is totally off topic, but do you think Bruce Wayne would be good on Love is Blind?
I think he would be amazing on Love is Blind, because I feel like, so if anyone hasn't seen Love is Blind, the premise of this particular dating reality show that I'm always telling Rebecca she has to watch the new season.
Morgan has gotten me hooked on it, and I'm very upset with her for getting me to watch the
You
show.
are welcome. But they like put this like single men and single women in these pods, and then they talk to each other through the pods, and they don't see each other. And they're supposed to connect on a real level. And then when they get out, they get engaged. Definitely a great idea. Without having even seen each other. And then they have like a month to get married. Can't see how that could go wrong. So I feel like Bruce Wayne would do amazing, because I think that like immediately he would trauma dump on every person he talked to.
That's so true.
So I think that like, but they would be like, oh my God, he's really opening up to me. He's told me stuff that he's never told anyone before about his parents' death. And it's like, actually, he's told every person he's ever met about it. He's like, I'm just so comfortable with you that I can relive this over and over again.
He would also, because I've seen, I think in this new season of Love is Blind, this girl like has the guy like doing push-ups in the room.
Yes, he would love
So
that.
Bruce Wayne would be like, how many push-ups you want me to do? I think he would be into that. So I guess you could tell like a Batman story without him being Batman or without a villain.
Just a Bruce. I would listen. I would sign up for a Bruce Wayne story, because I think one of the appeals of Batman, at least to me, is that like when you take a step back and you really look at the Batman story, like Bruce Wayne is not well. Like Bruce Wayne is not
okay.
well. He is not okay. And so I could follow him around like as he just has bad coping mechanisms for his daily life.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that they talked quite a lot about in the documentary, which I thought was really interesting. Was Zack Snyder, who miraculously shows up in this documentary, because I think this was right after or around the time that Man of Steel was,
I think so, yeah.
was just coming out. He says, without the villain to define the hero, you don't have a hero. And then Bobby Chase says, the more power supervillains have, the more you showcase how important the superhero is. And they also, the documentary brought up, it pointed out that the relationship between a hero and a villain is interdependent, and that they can't exist without each other. So I thought that was that whole segment of the documentary I really liked, because there is a discussion about that. And we'll get to that maybe more in Snap Judgments about who came first, the hero or the villain. And that is, I guess, dependent on your story. It could go either way in terms of when they appear and who shows up first. So I thought all of that was really interesting in the documentary.
I thought they got really good like people to be talking heads in this documentary. They maybe arguably had too many, because there would be like they would pop up to like show another guy, and I'd be like, ooh, I don't remember who this is. Like we're talking like 10 different people. I can't be excited to remember all their names or like what their deal is. But they did have like, it felt like they had a wide variety of people, and it felt like the people that they were talking to were people that they were actually talking to, and not like
file
footage, like which is a critique that we had of the DC, like the superpowered documentary series, which is that they had a lot of talking heads, but a lot of them were definitely like archival footage or like press junkets that they were just taking little clips out of and like putting it into the story. Whereas here I felt like they actually sat down with people and were like, all right, tell me about villains. They talked to people who were involved in the different, animated shows, the live action shows. But my favorite person that they talked to, hands down, was Scott Porter from Friday Night Lights.
Or was it? He was also, his lower third, I think, said Heart of Dixie.
And Heart of Dixie. I looked at the lower third. I looked back up at Scott Porter. I looked down at the lower third, and I thought, sir, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Why are you here? I don't know if he's been involved in DC stuff in the past. I think I vaguely did remember that he's like a comic super fan, and honestly some of his insights were really good, and I was like, Scott Porter, how could I ever like question your bona fides when you were on such a great show as Friday Night Lights. Texas Forever Street. But I do think it's funny, if he was ever in something DC, it feels like that's the thing you should have put in the lower third. If he wasn't, like, I feel like you should have put like actor Heart of Dixie, super fan. Like, just let us know why he's here.
Yeah, I tried to look that up. I think after this documentary was made, he was the voice of Dick Grayson in a video game, maybe? But I
Oh.
think he had also done some other DC thing maybe
It looks
around this time,
like
but I'm pretty sure it was just voice acting.
yeah, it looks like he voiced Aquaman and Superboy for the video game Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. Nightwing
When would
Night
that have been? What year?
that I don't know.
Oh, okay.
This is off of the fandom DC database for Scott Porter. It looks like he mostly just did video game voices though. So it was like Nightwing for the video game Batman Arkham Knight, Damian Wayne for the video game Injustice 2. So not animation or live action or anything like that.
But even
and
so,
probably
if it
afterwards.
yeah, if it was, they should have put that in the lower third. If it was like before this documentary had
I like
been
to
developed.
imagine that like he like networked his way into being on this documentary that by just like talking to everybody about like, oh my God, do you know what the Joker's deal is? And people were like, Scott, stop. And he was like, I'll never stop until you put me in a documentary.
New Rachel in the chat says he's in Harley Quinn.
Oh no way.
Who does he play in Harley Quinn, Rachel? Give us the scoop.
I would love to know that. Harley
Yes.
Quinn. I'm doing a little bit of Googling. It looks like he is the Flash in Harley Quinn.
Oh, well, he talked about the Flash and Reverse Flash
He
in
did.
the documentary.
Apparently he's going to be in the new Suicide Squad game, Rachel also says.
Yes. Well, he obviously knows a lot about DC.
He's a big fan.
You wouldn't have really known that by his Heart of Dixie lower third.
I like actually laughed out loud when I saw the lower third come up as hard. Also, okay, I'm not throwing shade on Heart of Dixie. I'm sure that's actually like what was on the air.
That's
at
a
the
show
time.
about Alabama, right?
Yes.
I refused to watch it because I just couldn't. I judged it before, like thinking, their accents
fair.
are going to be terrible.
I'm
so
sure
I just
they
never
were.
watched. I never watched it.
My mom used to watch it, and sometimes I would like when I was like over there, I would walk into the room when she was watching it, and I did say like, "What are these accents?" And that's coming from somebody who lives in New Jersey. I feel like that's not a good sign. But I will say, like, I'm sure that's probably like the TV show that was on at the time. But let's be honest, Friday Night Lights is such a good TV show. I feel like if he had to pick which was gonna be in the lower third.
Well, you got to think about the synergy, though. Heart of Dixie would have been on the CW, right?
That's the Warner, the WB synergy, baby.
Yeah.
Go watch Heart of Dixie because you loved him so much in this doc.
Yeah, so I think Heart of Dixie was CW, so that would have been the connection there. So yeah, I did have the same thought. I had to go look him up. That's the only reason I knew he was a voice actor in one of the video games. So yeah, I guess he's just a big super fan, and they brought him in. But he did have some good things too.
He did.
I was impressed.
I was like, good job, Street.
He was good about that. The other thing, just focusing on the villains, I thought was interesting because I guess I had never thought about it in this way. The narration by Christopher Lee says the supervillain reflects our fears and frustrations. And I guess I had never really thought about it in that way in terms of like, villains who take over the world or they're just killing somebody out of revenge or whatever. But I've never thought about putting, as a writer, like putting your personal fears onto a villain. But I guess you could do it in that way. Like I'm thinking, because I bring this up all the time, like Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. The Lex Luthor in that film has fears related to Superman that are pretty, I think, fairly reasonable. He's like, oh my gosh, there's this alien who shoots fire from his eyes. That's a very scary thing. And so I guess if you wanted to like put yourself onto that character and make it a realistic human reaction, you would be putting your fears about the hero onto that character. And I never really thought about it in that way before.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And they even mention it in the documentary that like the Lex Luthor perspective on Superman it like is kind of it depending on how you present it in media, comics, books, TV, it's kind of reasonable. Like, here's this guy, he is super, super strong, and he can pretty much do anything, and nobody can really take him down. He's kind of invincible, and he just gets to decide what's right and wrong, and you just have to kind of live with what he decides. And and we know that Clark Kent is a good dude, but you're putting a lot of faith in just some random dude you don't know that well. So
Who came from another planet?
Who came from another planet. And so I feel like the Lex Luthor thing is always kind of interesting, and when they dive into that part of, because Lex Luthor has changed a lot over the different incarnations, but whenever they dive into like that part of his, like, well, part of it is just that I think that this guy's like weird and creepy, and like it weirds me out that he has so much power. Not me, Lex Luthor. I think that there is something a little bit understandable in his motivations, and I always think it's fun when the movies and the TV shows and stuff play with that, because it's like, when he's just like a crazy mad scientist billionaire who wants to like take over the world, they're like, yeah, no, that feels right. I mean, for every billionaire, but it's it's kind of black and white. Whereas if he goes like, I don't know though, like, are we giving Superman too much power? He can just kind of do whatever he wants, and we really can't stop him. Then you do have to stop and go, I mean, I guess we can't.
Yeah, and to your point, Lex Luthor has been played around with a little bit in terms of his characterization, because in terms of the hero and the villain status too, like Superman Red Son, Lex Luthor is the president of the United States, and Superman is sort of a tyrannical kind of dictatorish figure. Yeah. So that you can play with those characters and flip them a little bit. And they talked about that in the documentary too. How do you take a hero and make him make a bad decision and come back from it? And how do you take a bad guy and redeem them in some way? Or do you even want to redeem a bad guy? So I think those were, writing wise, I thought those were really interesting discussions to be had in terms of story and how you do these different turns with the characters and how you make a story work. I thought was really a good discussion to be had.
Yeah, and as somebody who isn't a Green Lantern fan and doesn't know anything about his stories, I was surprised to learn that there was a period of time when, like, Hal Jordan's character, Green Lantern character, turned bad and became, I think, Parallax.
Yes, Parallax. You should look up the cover where he's got all of search Green Lantern rings. There's a really famous cover where the Hal is like on the cover, and he's got all the Green Lantern rings on. It's a pretty creepy cover. Hal Jordan rings cover. Yeah. So that's where he. Yeah, it's let me see if I can pull it up on the stream.
He's looking pretty intense.
Yeah. I'll see if I can pull that up on the stream so everybody can see it. But yeah, they've played around with the different interpretations of even Green Lantern, who by all accounts should be a hero. For whatever reason, I cannot pull this up on the stream. So just do Google searches for Hal Jordan Green Lantern rings.
Let me see. I think I might be able to do that really quick.
Yeah, all the ones I was finding were like, error, you cannot look at this.
Here we go. So I believe it's this one, right? Where he's like got all the rings, and he's kind of like, like you can
laugh.
You can hear the evil laughter in this photo through the screen. Green Lantern not doing great right there.
Yeah. So they talked about how you play around with those different shades of characters, and I thought that was a really good discussion. And something they also mentioned, which is something that I had never thought about with a villain, was that the documentary discusses temptation and how we can relate to that in a villain. And I guess if you are a bad guy and you do bad things, you are tempted to do those bad things. It goes against, you might have a moral center. Some of these villains might have a moral code that they live by, but that they can be tempted and then succumb to that temptation to do a bad thing. And that was also something I had never really thought about in those terms before. But I think that is something that if you wanted to write a bad guy that you could maybe not relate to, that might not be the greatest way to put it, but empathize with in some way. I mean, we all kind of go through periods where we're tempted to do something bad, or we're tempted to think something bad. And so we all deal with temptation as human beings, but these characters in comic books, when they're tempted, sometimes they give into it and they do a bad thing. So I thought that was also a really interesting comment to make about villainy in comic books in particular.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I liked how they kind of talked about, that the villains are kind of like part of like the collective id almost. That like they're the things that, they do things that maybe, some people sometimes want to do. Like, we all would like more money, but we don't usually go rob a bank with our cold guns to get it. So it's like, they take kind of a very human want or desire to like be powerful or, to be rich or all of these other things. And they really twist it. And I thought that that was really interesting. I love the when they were talking about, again, Batman villains, but what are you going to do? How the Batman villains are, some of them, the big ones, are just kind of manifestations of different parts of Bruce's character. So like Bruce is a detective, so you have to give him a villain that leaves a lot of clues. So you give him
the Riddler.
The Riddler. I was about to say, now I'm going to forget. And they talked about like other different aspects of Batman and how these different villains bring out those different aspects. And they did the same with like Superman, which is like Lex Luthor can't outsmarts him more than he can, overpower him because he's just a guy. But then, you have somebody like Doomsday, or you have somebody like Zod who can actually fight him on like a person to person level.
Yeah, I think those are the aspects of the documentary where I think really elevated the discussion about these concepts. I think those are really interesting because then you could have some examples to point to say, this is how we have done it here at DC Comics with the people who have written these stories. So I thought that those were all really good discussions. New Rachel in the chat has a really good question. Are there any villains you feel like the documentary overlooked or actors who should have been included? So this would have been 2013.
2013.
So you have to think back there if you want to drop.
Taking it back 10 years ago.
So that would have been prior to the Supergirl TV series.
Yes, pre-Supergirl.
So we cannot mention any Supergirl people in there. They sort of they mentioned Darkseid. I'm a big Darkseid fan. But one of the things that I like about I shouldn't say that I like about Darkseid. But one of the things I thought was really good about what the DCEU did with Darkseid that I think I would want to see. I don't know if it's always the case with Darkseid, but so like Darkseid is famous for having the anti-life equation, which removes people's free will, and he can control them and take over whole worlds and civilizations. And what I thought the DCEU did really well is that they contrasted him with Superman, who was the embodiment of free will. And I always thought that that was a really cool hero villain dynamic, that you had somebody who embodied free will and the villain who took it away. And I thought that was really cool. So I wish there had been more of a philosophical take on Darkseid to see what people had to say about him, because sometimes I think Darkseid is just depicted as this tyrannical ruler in this hellscape of apocalypse, and he has these parademon henchmen, and just kind of is a bad guy who does bad things. And I feel like I'm frozen again. Am I frozen again?
No. Oh, yeah, you are.
God. All right.
You weren't for a second, and then you froze.
Okay, I will come back. I will go out and come back in. But if you want, Morgan, if you have any villains that you feel like the documentary overlooked, feel free to talk about that while I try to fix this.
Sure. Yeah. I think so. I don't have like specific villains that I can think of right offhand that the documentary overlooked, but they were really light on Wonder Woman. They like showed Cheetah, and they're like, Cheetah and Wonder Woman were friends, and now they're not. And then they just kind of skimmed it, and they're like, oh, and she had some like brother at one point, and then those are the two. But I would have loved to see them play a little bit more with some of Wonder Woman's villains, because we got a lot of not a lot, but we got some Superman, got a lot of Batman, we got a lot of Green Lantern, some Flash. But I feel like they really kind of skimmed out when it came to the other, the other member of the big trilogy, which is usually Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. They got to Wonder Woman, there was like, yeah, we all remember Cheetah. Okay, moving on. So yeah, I would have loved to see more. I think more Wonder Woman villains. If you're gonna go do a deep dive on the other two, you gotta give her throw a couple of her villains in there. Good question. It looks like Rebecca is coming back.
All right,
You're back.
sure my audio is okay. I don't know. Chrome is just failing me.
Do we think it's Chrome or do we think it's StreamYard?
I think my Chrome is freezing up.
Oh no,
Yeah,
because
so I don't-
StreamYard and we have not been doing very well recently.
So we have upset StreamYard in a way that
We have angered the StreamYard gods. The only thing that you missed is that I said that I didn't have a specific villain in mind, but I felt like they talked a lot about Superman villains. They talked a lot about Batman villains. And then they were like,
and Green Lantern villains.
And also Wonder Woman exists and there's Cheetah. Anyway, moving on. So I would have liked to get more into Wonder Woman villains because it's been a while since I read like some of the George Perez run on her book. But even if like the point they were making is like some heroes don't have like the Batman rogues gallery or the Flash rogues gallery, like that would I think also have been interesting if they're like, yeah, Wonder Woman, here's why Wonder Woman doesn't have big iconic villains like Superman does or Batman does. I thought that would have been interesting, but then they were like, and Wonder Woman anyway.
Yeah, people I think most people would attribute Cheetah to Wonder Woman, but what I think is missing there is Ares. Ares is a great villain. You mentioned that George Perez version of Wonder Woman. Ares is amazing. He's a great villain in that comic book run.
He is.
He's a very powerful foe, and only Diana could really fight him. And so I think Ares would definitely be one that I think that the documentary maybe should have talked about, especially because that would have been a really cool discussion about how to incorporate these. He would have been a Greek god. Ares, yes, I always get the Greek and Roman gods mixed up. But but incorporating these like Greek mythology characters into the comic book mythology and how they, how do you do that? How do you bring these characters from of old and bring them into the comic book world and make them work in this world? And what does that mean for worldviews in the multiverse? So I think that could be a really cool discussion because the Greek gods, Artemis and Zeus and trying to think of all the different ones, but they're all existing within the world of DC Comics and in Wonder Woman's mythology. So I think Ares would be another one for sure. I think that's upsetting that he was. Did they show him? They might have shown him.
They talked about one of her villains, which was like her like half brother or her brother that was like cast out of I think Olympus.
But it wasn't Ares though.
But it wasn't Ares. Yeah. And I mean, I think the fact that I know a lot about Green Lantern's villains now, but nothing about Wonder Woman shows that they didn't really go in depth. They were just like, oh, so I guess she's got a brother. He's evil anyway.
Yeah. I think Wonder Woman, especially if, and I don't know a ton of Wonder Woman mythology, but I definitely know that Ares would have been one to talk about. And I think that you make up a great point that if there is a conversation where it's like, well, she don't really have that big of a rogues gallery, then that would be a discussion of, well, maybe we need to create some.
Yeah.
And I think it was Marv Wolfman in the documentary where he said, if you have a hero fight a villain that they've already gone up against before, always introduce a new character alongside them. And I thought that was actually really clever. I think that's a good strategy to continually introduce new characters by sort of putting them in a story with another common foe that a hero goes up against. And it's a way to keep the material fresh. And I think you could do that with Wonder Woman if she doesn't have the same kind of rogue gallery as some of these other big characters. maybe work on that.
Just you can make some, because it reminded me of some of like the Supergirl comics that we read, where they would use like a villain that we've heard of before, and then they would make up a new one. Trying to think of, what was the lady who was like made of crystal?
Oh my gosh!
Do you remember her? Do you remember?
Started with a G.
Do you remember when she was falling and she was like this again in that one panel? I'll never forget it.
It was like one where like there was no glass.
Yes.
Oh my gosh! What was her name?
I cannot
bother
remember.
Me. We have to find it now because that's gonna bother me.
I can't remember what comic was that. Adventures of Supergirl?
That was Rebirth.
Or is that Rebirth?
I'm pretty sure it was Rebirth. Can you hear me?
Yeah, because I think it was
okay.
𝙎𝙪𝙥𝙾 was a villain in Adventures of Supergirl. So
it started with a G, and I cannot remember.
Oh man, this is gonna haunt me.
Oh my gosh! Yes. Well, and I can't even search my Google Docs because I'm like, how do I search for that?
What was her name? But anyway, I loved her. Obviously not enough to remember her name. But she was an icon. And let's see. I'm looking up Supergirl villains.
It's got to be late Rebirth. Supergirl Rebirth.
Yeah, I think it was.
Let's see.
Villain teams. Human villains. No, she was definitely like a crystal lady.
Oh my
I'll never remember, but I'll never forget. That's the point.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna bother me. We'll have to do. It was oh my gosh, it was that same run where that guy who 𝙤𝙬𝙘𝙀. Oh,
yes.
look up 𝙤𝙬𝙘𝙀. It was his mother.
Oh, that's right. How would you even spell that? Do you
remember? 𝐿_NDR Cole KOL. 𝙤𝙬𝙘𝙀. What was his mother's name? We're gonna figure this out.
We are gonna find this. My Google's like, I have literally no idea what you're trying to get from me. I guess there's not a lot of people Googling 𝙤𝙬𝙘𝙀's mother. And I think that's rude.
We're gonna figure this out, I promise. Let's see. All right, so Gandello. That's who it was. Yes. Okay. The Google Docs have saved me again.
We got it. Anyway, loved her.
Yes. She was definitely a new villain for Supergirl, specifically in the Rebirth run, and so she was introduced to give Supergirl somebody new to face. And New Rachel even says in the chat that Facet was like that in the Adventures of Supergirl run by Sterling Gates.
That was another one that I think I was conflating Facet and Gandello, both icons in their own way. But yeah, like to the point where it's like, yeah, I guess Supergirl has villains that she goes up against, but she doesn't have like her Joker or her Lex Luthor. I wouldn't say necessarily. Like the one that everybody knows, and you're like, oh, the villain for Superman is Lex Luthor, the villain for Batman is the Joker. But that kind of gives you more flexibility to create new villains. And like, look at Harley Quinn as an example of, like a one-off villain that they created for the Batman TV show that just really took off. Now she's got her own show. So like, you never know if you might be creating like the new iconic Supergirl villain.
Yeah, I think that is a good problem to have, because then it forces you to be creative as a writer, to come up with something new and try to deliver something fresh. Because every one of these big villains, Joker, Sinestro, the Riddler, other villains, those at one time were introduced by a writer who that they didn't exist previously, and so somebody introduced them, and they became a big they became big staples of the DC universe. So I think that I think it was Darkseid introduced in Jimmy Olsen's pal Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen? I feel like he was. I think
I think so.
I think Darkseid was introduced in a Jimmy Olsen comic.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So you never know what's going to take off. So I think it actually is a good way to force a writer to have to come up with something new and fresh. So I think it's actually a good problem when the character doesn't have a big villain to go up against, because then you could create one.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. So I kind of wish like they could have taken that tack of being like, not all of these superheroes have iconic villains, and it actually would have been really fun to get into some of like the weirder, wackier villains, because they talk about like there are literally thousands of villains in the DC canon, and I mean let's get into them. Like Kite Man is a real character. I like. When I started watching Harley Quinn and he showed up, I was like, what a funny joke about like what kind of weird villains there could be. And Mike was like, I think that he's real.
he's a character in the comic.
Yeah, I love that they like there's these, these truly wild out there villains that like maybe were in 1 or 2 issues, or like we're back in the Silver Age or something, and they are amazing to talk about. Like I would have liked if they talked about some lesser known villains in addition to like the heavy hitters. They were like, yeah, you have Sinestro and the Joker, but also Clockman.
Yeah, Clock King or whatever it is.
Clock King.
Sometimes they think Clock King has like a clock for a face.
Clock for a face.
Yeah.
That's the version I love. He's so cute.
Yeah, well, that's a good point though. Even though Batman has this great rogues gallery with these really famous villains, some of his rogues gallery are these like weird ones.
Yes.
That they're just trying to pump new life into the Batman mythology with. So I think that's a really good point. Well, before we wrap up our time talking about this documentary, I thought we could go through a category list that the documentary mentions. They sort of break up villains in into categories. So like all villains are usually these things. So so the categories of villains are monster, mad scientist, militant general, criminal mastermind, and the femme fatale. So I thought we could maybe go through a list of Supergirl TV show villains and maybe put those villains into those categories if we can put them into them. So Morgan, do you
I love it.
Should I share my screen?
Sure.
Or because can you remember the categories? I guess I could reiterate them. But it's monster, mad scientist, militant general. Actually, do we have that in the doc?
We do.
Okay, so so we don't have to like continually repeat them. Okay. Okay, good. So we can just do these I've got a big list, so we can go through these. Okay, so Vartox, he is the bad guy in the pilot episode of Supergirl season 1. He's like, you're a woman and I don't like ladies and I'm gonna beat you up, that kind of guy. So he had an
I've been
axe.
in space jail real long and I'm mad about it.
So what category would you put Vartox in?
I feel like he had like a monster vibe for me.
Yeah, he's definitely not a mad scientist because he wasn't real smart. He didn't have the authority to be a militant general.
No,
he wasn't smart enough to be a criminal mastermind, and I don't see him as a femme fatale. So yeah, I would put him as monster as well. Okay, 𝙎𝙪𝙘𝙘.
I hate to keep saying monster, but I think also monster on this one.
I think also monster. Yes, that's where I would put him. Okay, so Astra. Where would you put Astra?
Astra, I feel like kind of militant general there, because she was like, she had her own group that she was like leading of the like Kryptonians. So, and the people in the Phantom Zone. Was it the Phantom Zone, or it was the jail?
Fort Roz.
Fort Roz, that's right.
Astra was literally a general.
That's true.
So yes, I would put her as militant general. Okay, Non.
Ooh, I feel like he's also kind of in the same category for me.
Yeah, he kind of came after Astra, so yeah, militant general for Non. Maxwell Lord.
Maxwell Lord, I feel like is a he's kind of interesting. I think he's a combo of like the criminal mastermind and the mad scientist,
Yeah.
but I think he leans a little bit more towards criminal mastermind.
Yeah, he's a tough one because it seemed like the categories in the film, the documentary film, were like they have to only be in one. But maybe you could put him in two different categories
I
and mix
think
them up.
he's straddling the line, I
Yeah.
think. But if I had to pick one, I would pick criminal mastermind.
If I had to pick one, I might put him as mad scientist because
Ooh.
he did all those Bizarro experiments.
He sure did.
So I didn't think he was as much a mastermind. He was definitely a criminal. I don't know if he was a mastermind, but I think I would put him as mad scientist because of Bizarro. Okay, Reactron. Reactron was episode 3 of season 1. He had like the suit.
Yeah, I feel like he's a tough one too. I'm vaguely leaning towards mad scientist, but I could be convinced of like monster.
I was going monster.
Yeah.
Even that, like, I don't guess monsters have to be some other non-human characters. I feel like
I don't think that they
I feel like a human character could be a monster. So yeah, okay. Reactron monster. Livewire.
Ooh, Livewire is definitely criminal mastermind, I think.
Does femme fatale always have to be like sexual?
I feel like femme fatale has like a certain like
a subtext,
sensuality to it.
Okay.
In some way, even if it's like not necessarily like I'm the sexiest gal around. There's something that's like a little bit sultry about a femme fatale, whereas Livewire was just like I'm going to electrocute you.
Yeah, I hate to say this about Livewire because I love Livewire so much. I might put her as monster.
Ooh,
even though she gets redeemed later.
That's I could kind of see an argument for monster because
although
she gets those powers and immediately is like I'm gonna electrocute everyone.
Although I could see you could make a case for criminal mastermind. She did break into Kat's monitors and did
true.
like, hey, I'm a villain. So she had plans. And also she teamed up with Silver Banshee where they planned some things out. Okay, I've convinced myself criminal mastermind is more appropriate. Okay, Red Tornado.
Red Tornado is tough because they gave poor Red a raw deal on on the series. So I'm gonna go monster for poor Red Tornado.
Yeah, Red Tornado didn't really have much of a mind of his own, it seemed like. So I would also say monster.
Not the best showing for him, for sure.
No, but we did create a storyline where he was surfing. Red Tornado's a big surfer.
That's true.
In our minds.
On his off hours, man, he's just catching those gnarly waves.
Okay, Toy Man.
Ooh, I think Toy Man. Because I feel like you gotta go mad scientist for Toy Man.
Yeah. Because he's inventing things.
That was my thought process.
He's also a character I think straddles between mad scientist and criminal mastermind.
Oh, for sure.
But I think if you had to pick one, I'm going to go mad scientist there. All right. So who are we going to now? Okay. So Bizarro.
I feel like Bizarro's got real monster vibes.
Yeah. Bizarro is the monster version of Supergirl. So I would say monster there. Although in her heart, Bizarro is not a Bizarro.
That's true.
Just misunderstood. Just really needing
like Frankenstein.
Yeah. Okay, Master Jailer. Locking people up, throwing chains on people.
That's definitely a militant general if I ever saw one.
Yeah, I would also say militant general for Master Jailer. All right, Red K Kara.
This one's tough because I don't feel like Red K Kara really fits into any of these categories because she's just kind of out of control. I don't think that she's masterminding anything. She's just like could I chaos a bit? What if I destroyed my own life? So I don't know, maybe femme fatale, because she does dance up on Jimmy in a way that makes him uncomfortable.
There is a sexy component to Red K Kara. So yeah, I'm gonna go.
She's like, I'm
femme
wearing
fatale.
black now and it's tight. And Jimmy's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Silver Banshee.
Silver Banshee, I feel like you could probably make an argument for monster, and you could also make an argument for criminal mastermind. I'm not really sure.
I would not put her as criminal mastermind.
Shit, I mean the mastermind. If you take off criminal, I could see. I just gotta go monster. I was just sorry. She's just like a sexy monster. I can't do anything about it.
I think I'm gonna put her as monster on that one as well. Indigo.
Indigo
is the greatest hand acting.
Is giving me femme fatale. Like I know that I know that Indigo is probably closer to like a militant general or like a mad scientist, but like the finger acting, like the way that she would just kind of slide up to Non, like, "What's up? Did your wife die? Sad." I feel like that's classic femme fatale behavior.
Yes, 100%. Okay, Lillian Luthor.
Lillian Luthor, my girl. I feel like she's a criminal mastermind because she is not a mad scientist. She's not gonna like go into the lab and like tinker herself. That's what the other people do.
Okay, I will counterpoint.
Ooh, okay.
When she was first introduced in Supergirl, she was introduced as the Doctor, and she
That
had
is
created
true.
Metallo, and she also we found out in season 5 during the whole like Lena Luthor Metallo situation that Lillian Luthor had created her as Metallo. So
Ooh.
she could lean towards mad scientist because she was with Project Cadmus and all of that kind of stuff.
True.
And she hung around with Cyborg Superman.
I just think of her like as like a bad business Lillian Luthor
with the pink pastels,
with her pink pastels
and her pearl necklace
in her boardroom with her tiny purse that she like carries. Like a boss. She's hashtag girl bossing. That's kind of on my Lillian Luthor vision board, but you are right in that she has created some monsters in her day. Who among us haven't? So maybe I could get on the mad scientist bandwagon with her as well.
I love Lillian Luthor so much.
So great.
I think I would put her at mad scientist.
All right, let's do it. Mad scientist.
Okay. All right. Queen Rhea.
Ooh, Queen Rhea, I feel like is a militant general.
Yeah, that's where I would put her as well. She was commanding forces. Metallo.
I feel like Metallo is kind of monstery.
Yeah, definitely monster. Roulette.
Ooh, this is a good one because I don't remember her too well.
Roulette was the like the ring master of the underground fighting ring that they had in season 2. She had the red dress that was like split.
Okay, that's classic femme fatale. I still remember the red. I don't remember her. I remember the red dress. That says femme fatale all over to me.
Yes, I would say femme fatale, just because of the dress. And the things that she was kind of in that underground crime area. So I think that would put her there. Okay, so Cyborg Superman.
I think monster.
Yeah, monster. He wasn't super smart. He didn't really do much anything, but he was kind of a real missed opportunity with him. So yeah, I would say monster. Music Meister.
So this is my issue with these categories of villains is I feel like there should be like a trickster category.
Ooh, yes.
Or just like a chaos agent category. Like,
yes.
I don't see Music Meister as somebody who's got like a military mission or a plan of any kind. He's just like, wouldn't it be funny if? And he doesn't really care what happens after that. And so I don't know with the categories we have. I feel like maybe like Criminal Mastermind doesn't feel right and Mad Scientist doesn't feel right, but Monster also doesn't feel right. So I'm sort of at a loss with him.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, I guess I would say Criminal Mastermind because he did create a world in which they had to sing their way out of.
That is true.
So he put them in there in a way that they didn't know what to do, and so he was a little smarter than them at that point. So I guess that's where I would put him. Rain.
Ooh, I want to military general, because I feel like she's got a little bit of that. I could also be convinced of like criminal mastermind for her. She's got a plan.
Yeah.
But
Sam,
she seems like
Sam
more
did, but-
regimented.
yeah. And also Rain had her world killers.
She
So she was
did.
kind of like a ringleader of those folks. I could go between Monster and Militant General, but I think I maybe for this one would go Militant General.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely make an argument for Monster. But I feel like, to me, when I hear a monster, and this is very discriminatory of me against the monster community, is that I'm like, I feel like the monsters aren't planning a lot of things. But you know what? Rain was.
So what about our favorite of the world killers, Grace?
Oh,
slash
Grace,
Pestilence?
girl. We love Grace here. Yeah, Grace is a monster for sure.
She enjoyed being a villain. I'm gonna put her at monster as well. 𝙬.
Ooh, I feel like
That's a tough one.
𝙬 might be a monster too.
Yeah, as she is portrayed here. Ooh.
It's tough.
Yeah, because I didn't really feel like she was a criminal mastermind. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go monster on 𝙬. Morgan Edge.
I think Morgan Edge is kind of a straightforward criminal mastermind. He's just like, I'm a criminal. That's my main thing.
Yeah, I think he has aspirations to be a criminal mastermind, but on Supergirl, I don't know that he lived up to that. But I think that's what he wanted to be.
The mastermind you'd have to scratch out, like line through. But that's where he wanted to go. That's his goal.
Yeah.
He has that on as a daily affirmation that he repeats to himself in the mirror. Like, you are a criminal mastermind, he says to himself.
Okay, one of my personal favorite Supergirl villains, Overgirl.
Ooh, she's a tough one. I almost want to say Militant General with Overgirl.
She was the head of her group, her Nazi Reich. She was like at the tippy top. So yeah, I would put Militant General for Overgirl. I love that scene so much between Kara and Overgirl, where Overgirl's like, why do you care if I take your heart? You're not using it.
Oh, I like that
it
it works
so
on
much.
so many levels, where she's like, she's threatening to kill her, and she is, basically being like, you don't need it, but she's also being like, you're very single right now, which is like, and amazingly, like, as you're about to die, you're like about to be like bested by your opponent, you're like, I'm not strong enough to like fight this battle. And also, that was really passive aggressive, and I feel like really sad about my social life right now.
Overgirl did not have any room to talk. She was married to Oliver Queen. I think it's better to be single at that point.
Be single. You don't want that.
All right, so Selena, the head of the Kryptonian witches.
Oh, Selena. She was fun. I think she's got kind of a mad scientist vibe for me. I think that's probably wrong. But
Well, no, I could see the argument for that, because they were in charge of the world killers. I think they kind of created the world killers. I think you won me over to that. So I was initially going to say monster, but now that I think about that, I'm going to say mad scientist. I think that's exactly where she needs to be. Okay, Lex Luthor.
Lex is a tough one, because he's known as being a criminal mastermind, but he's also known as being a mad scientist. So it's like, which of his two main things do you want to pick? But I think I'm going to go mad scientist for him.
So I'm going to go criminal mastermind, specifically on Supergirl.
Oh, you're right, because on Supergirl, he's not creating much.
He sort of played around, I guess, with the timeline with Nixley. So he sort of did
that barely
some of
counts.
that.
Yeah, let's go criminal mastermind. I was thinking more of like a combination of the Lex Luthors, but on Supergirl, the TV show, yeah, criminal mastermind all the way.
Yeah, because that was his whole shtick for seasons 4, 5, and 6. It was like, who is behind this plan? Oh, it's Lex Luthor. Wah, wah, wah. It's like it was always Lex Luthor's big plan. So I'm gonna go criminal mastermind. Okay, this is a tough one because she left us too soon. Mercy Graves.
I don't like to think about it. It makes me too mad. It makes me too mad to think about it. I'm gonna give her a criminal mastermind. Just like let's elevate her in death. What she couldn't have in life.
I would like to think that she would have been the greatest of the criminal masterminds. So yes, let's remember her in that way.
She would have been the GOAT, man. She flew too close to the sun. They couldn't let her have
it. One of the characters that did survive, Miss Tessmacher. Where are we putting her?
I think you got to go criminal mastermind on her because she did a lot of plans. Like it turned out she was being manipulated, but she did her own scheming. So I think that like elevates her a little bit.
Yeah, I think she voluntarily shot James in the back in the
She did. She was fine with that.
Going to his home under the desk.
She took that assignment on. She's like, no, I'll take that one. I'll take that. No. I got it. Don't worry about it. She did it with pleasure.
She also murdered Jeremiah Danvers, R.I.P.
R.I.P. Off screen, but never dead.
Yeah, I'm going to say criminal mastermind there. Although you could make a case for monster.
You could.
If you wanted to. Agent Liberty.
Militant general for sure.
Yeah, he was in charge of a whole nasty group of people. So yeah, militant general. And he would probably see himself as a general of his side.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is I'm kind of breaking this up. So we're gonna go Leviathan. And then
whoever that is.
We're not really sure who the head of Leviathan ended up being at the end of season 5. But let's break it down. So pencil skirt.
Ooh, okay. Pencil skirt. I don't want to give her criminal mastermind because I don't think she did enough to deserve it. But I don't feel like anything else really captures her. So I think I'm gonna go criminal mastermind for her. I feel like that's what she was aspiring to.
I'm gonna go monster because you remember at the end when she's like revealed when she dies,
she's like
a Rugrats character.
She's like a Medusa snake lady. She looks like a Angelica's doll from Rugrats.
So I'm gonna go monster for her. Ramakhan,
classic monster, man. Classic monster.
Yeah.
Just monsters all the way down.
Just
he loved
throwing
dirt.
Yep.
He loved plants. He loves his winery where he retires with a nice glass of Chianti.
Yes.
As all monsters do.
Yeah, Leviathan, straight monsters all the way through. Manchester Black.
Manchester Black is another one that doesn't feel like he really fits into any of these categories. I feel like I'm going to go militant general with him because like he was like mission based. I feel like
he also had his own crew of villains.
That's true.
Hat. Yes, the hat. With Menagerie, who I think we both loved. She just really enjoyed being a villain. So
she loved it.
Yeah. So I would say Manchester Black, militant general. Red. I put Red Daughter a question mark because she kind of became, I guess, redeemed at the end, but for the for the majority of season 4, I guess she was a villain.
I think you got to go monster on her. I feel like she was like she was redeemed, but she was kind of treated like a monster, so she became one.
Yeah. And she was trained to be a monster as well. Lex Luthor trained her to hate Supergirl. So I think I would put her in that category as well. Okay. All right. We've gotten to the end.
Okay.
There were some other like lesser known Supergirl villains on the TV show, but I kind of wanted to hit the high ones because the list would
the heavy hitters.
Yeah. So the last one, of course, is Nyxly from the Phantom Zone.
Nyxly's
and
tough.
The Fifth Dimension, I guess.
Nyxly's tough because I feel like you could make an argument for a couple of different categories. I think I'm going to go criminal mastermind for her, but I think you could make a monster argument. I think you could maybe even make it like a militant general argument. She was very mission-based as well. She had to collect all those pieces of the Rubik's
totems,
Cube to put them back together to with their powers combined. She made Captain Planet or whatever.
And
I don't
turned
remember.
into a lizard person.
That would really speak of monster, though.
Yes. She ended up as a monster. I think you maybe could go with, she starts out as a criminal mastermind. Then she maybe goes into femme fatale with that weird romance with Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And then she ends up as a monster.
But then she ends up right back at monster. As is her destiny.
So I think that's where I would put her on the villain category spectrum.
I see that Rachel in the chat said, also, would Hope as Eve be a monster? I think.
Ooh.
Yeah, probably. I think Hope's a monster.
I would want Hope to be a criminal mastermind. Like she's just planning everything. She has got everybody else is just puppets to Hope.
Everybody's playing checkers. She's playing chess.
I would put Hope the AI as criminal mastermind. That's where I like to see her. Let's see. I guess we could hop into the chat real quick. Before we wrap things up, Marcy Dalmatian in the chat says, in the real world, there's a stigma around mental health conditions, which likely explains some of the backstories of certain DC villains. And actually, the documentary talks about how with villains, you really need an origin story to explain why they do the things that they do. So that's one component of writing a villain, is to give them a good backstory to help you understand them. So I think that that's a great point to make.
Yeah, I think it was great that they also had, and I believe her name is Andrea. I can't remember her last name, but from the Arkham Sessions,
we're pretty sure that was her.
Yeah, we're pretty sure. We're not 100%, but we're pretty sure. Like to talk about it from like a psychiatrist, like psychological point of view, because I think that is an interesting point that they try to get into like real psychology on what would be driving some of these villains to make them more interesting and like more complex.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let's see. New Rachel in the chat says Indigo is the femme fatale for her weird thing with Non, but also criminal mastermind because she's a brainiac. Also a good point. She does have intelligence to her. Let's see if there are any. Oh, New Rachel also asked that question that I don't know if we should answer. Are we counting Lena Luthor as a villain?
I mean, I think if you count her season 5 blip, where she mind
controls the world,
like she's having a bad day. Okay,
she's just taking away people's free will.
It's really hard when your friends. It's really hard when your friends keep secrets from you. So then you have to make sure that no one can ever keep secrets again. Makes sense to me. No, I think that she would be a criminal mastermind, though. I think she'd be a mad scientist.
Oh, definitely. She had a Frankenstein.
Remember
that
when she
Adam guy
murdered that
she
guy?
Science murdered a guy.
Whoops. We love Lena here, though. Honestly, science murder whoever you want, girl.
She was one of those characters who is a gray character who waffled between aspirations for being a good character. She wanted to change the way that the Luthor name was conceived by the public or perceived by the public, I should say. And she wanted to do good in the world. She starts the Lena Luthor Foundation, which we're still not totally sure what they do.
It does something great, I think.
Yeah, it's not about trees though, which is disappointing.
She loves trees, but it's not saving them, I guess.
It's some sort of science mumbo jumbo that I don't really fully understand. But she has aspirations to help the world. So I guess in that way she would be a hero. And she's embraced by the other heroes on the show. She becomes part of the team. So she's not a villain all the way through the series. But she does have a little blip season 4 and 5.
A little blip. She has a little villainous moment, as we all do. I think it's funny because to me, some of the most interesting characters are the ones that are a little bit more morally gray, that could kind of go either way. So you gotta love a character who's got some layers. You're like, are they good? Are they bad? What are they doing now?
I guess that's fair. Most of the characters on Supergirl had moments where sometimes
actually, yeah. Actually, a lot of the characters had moments where you're like, Sean, what are you doing?
Supergirl went evil several times. So
a couple of times. Listen, who are we to judge?
yeah. So I guess Lena can be both, I suppose. And just to answer Stanley's question in the chat, did you mention Granny Goodness and the female Furies? Well, we didn't for this particular exercise because we were focusing on the Supergirl TV show villains. But Granny Goodness and the female Furies have been Supergirl foes in the comic books before. So that is a good thing to point out. But for our little category game here, it was specifically villains of the Supergirl TV series.
Now,
Well,
Rebecca, I don't have a
yes.
lot of experience with Granny Goodness or the female Furies, but if you had to quickly, like snap
categorize them.
judgment style, put them into a category, what would you do?
Okay, Granny Goodness would be Militant General.
Okay.
The female Furies, I think, just straight monster.
Just straight monsters.
Yeah, just
Love it.
all of them would be monsters. Yes. I think that's where I would squarely put them.
It's funny because now that we mention it, like they didn't really get brought up at all in the documentary.
No, and they're part of the Darkseid where I think you could spend a whole
Yeah.
section on villainy in the world of Apocalypse because there's a
Ooh.
whole other world going on Apocalypse with Apocalypse and Steppenwolf and Granny Goodness, the female Furies, that whole New Gods area of DC. You could spend a lot of time in that area, but they didn't talk much about Apocalypse, which I thought was strange because Darkseid is like considered the big bad of the DC universe. So it was kind of strange that they didn't really focus much on them in the documentary of Necessary Evil Supervillains of DC Comics. And speaking of which, Morgan, I guess, did you have any final thoughts? Would you recommend this to a DC fan?
You know, I think I would because I thought it was fun. I liked putting it on. I liked learning about the different villains. I think, you know, there are comic super fans who know all of this, who are very versed in DC. But I think a lot of comics fans are well versed in like a couple of characters or a couple of portions of a specific universe, but maybe don't know as much about somebody else. So I think that you can definitely still learn about different villains, and even if you don't, you can kind of learn about how the storytelling aspect of what goes into making a good villain and what their story purpose is, and you know how the creatives behind the scenes kind of look at creating a good villain. So I thought it was really interesting and fun. So I would definitely recommend it. I wish it was a little more focused or a little bit tighter, because I do feel like it kind of went in with a very like Wikipedia approach, where it went real broad, and I was I did kind of question like who the audience was for, but I think overall I sat down and enjoyed it, so I think a lot of people would.
Yeah, I would also say if you're a DC Comics fan, this is something that you would probably enjoy and maybe get something out of. I also was pleasantly surprised. I'd seen this a long time ago, so I was rewatching it for this. So after having watched Superpowered, the DC story, where it was kind of disappointing that comics were kind of there, but not as much. This one is pretty much all about the comics. There are some mentions of some of like maybe a little bit of the TV shows, and I was trying to think, there was a mention of like the Dark Knight with the Joker, but it was mostly about comic book stories, which I found very refreshing. So I enjoyed it on that aspect. So if you are looking for a new documentary just to kind of hang out with and enjoy, this is probably a good one for you to check out. Well, I think before we totally wrap up our conversation on this, Morgan, would you like to make some snap judgments?
Yes, of course.
In the game of snap judgments, each person is presented with 2 options, but must only choose one. First instincts are recommended and explanations are unnecessary.
Okay, so our first snap judgment. Which villain team would win in a battle? The Rogues versus the Suicide Squad.
So anybody watching live in the chat, you're welcome to play along with us and let us know what you think there in the chat. So the Rogues versus the Suicide Squad. I think, okay, so the I think I'm going to pick the Suicide Squad. And the reasons are that they've got Amanda Waller, who
Yes.
is a little bit of a militant general / criminal mastermind of her own. And also they have a real incentive to win the battle. Otherwise, they get killed. So I think because of the incentive to stay alive, I think they are going to work a little harder to win whatever battle they go into. So I'm going to say the Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I was leaning towards the Rogues, but now that you mentioned it, the Suicide Squad is very motivated. Like, so I think I'm going to go the Suicide Squad on this one too. Okay. You're writing a comic book story and need a villain. You can only develop a new character from one of the categories mentioned in Necessary Evil, supervillains of DC Comics. Do you choose a mad scientist or a femme fatale? I did this for Indigo. I did the little hand acting for Indigo.
I think I would find my writing a mad scientist a little more interesting. I love femme fatales. Like I love the Dick Tracy movie with Madonna as Breathless Mahoney. So I love a femme. I mean, Catwoman's a femme fatale. So I think they're really fun characters. But I think if I was writing it, I think I would have more fun with the mad scientist.
Yeah, mad scientists are really fun. I do think I'm gonna go with a femme fatale. I just like the I love the old like kind of like film noir, like that the dame came in and she's always like smoking a cigarette, like I don't know, I'm in danger or something. I love a good femme fatale. I feel like we don't get enough of them because they do talk about it in the documentary. They Catwoman they reference, but also Poison Ivy, who I used to love, and I still do. But like Poison Ivy from like the 90s, I feel like was very much a femme fatale. Like she was just like, "Hold on, I'm gonna kiss you to death," and she always had the best lipstick. So I think I would go femme fatale.
I think you would write a great femme fatale.
Thank
I think
you.
that would be a good story.
Okay, we need to answer the question that the documentary didn't want to settle on. Who came first, the hero or the villain?
I mean, you can make arguments for both of these.
You really could.
I think maybe we could phrase it as which would you like if you were writing a story? How would you approach it?
Ooh, good question.
I think the villain would come first in my story because I think to their point about the protagonist and how the villain is what gets things going. I think for me, you don't have a need to create a hero unless there's some danger or trouble in the world. So I think I would go the villain came first.
I don't know. I kind of feel like usually this because like I think the villain is great, but I feel like from a story perspective, you usually start with your hero and then you're like, what side of the hero can the villain test? Like they give the Riddler example for Batman. The Riddler only really exists to test Batman's detective skills. And so if there was no Batman to have detective skills, what about the Riddler? So I think I'm going to go the opposite. I think the hero comes first and then the villain comes out of a need to test like a specific part of that hero's character.
Well, I'm sorry to anyone listening or watching. We did not answer the question.
We didn't. We didn't come down definitively on any one side. We also hedged our bets like the documentary.
All right, that's going to take us out of Snap Judgments. No judgments on your Snap Judgments. All right, now we need to get to some Supergirl Radio and some DC TV podcast plugs. If you would like to contact Supergirl Radio, you can post a comment on our website at supergirlradio.com. You can email us at supergirlradio@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can call us at 678-718-7252. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram, all at Supergirl Radio. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Podchaser, and Spotify, where we also have a Spotify playlist that includes music featured on and inspired by the CW's Supergirl TV series. We are listed on DC's fan page, which you can find at dccomics.com/DC-fans. If you like what we do, we encourage you to give us a rating and write us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy our Supergirl Radio live streams, make sure to subscribe to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to get notified when we go live and Wired. DC TV Podcast also has a TeePublic store, so if you're in need of new DC TV related t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, onesies, mugs, notebooks, pillows, or stickers, go to supergirlradio.com and click on the TeePublic store link at the top of the page.
Now see here, Supergirl Radio is part of the DC TV Podcast Network. So if you want to listen to other shows, we've got The Flash Podcast, Legends of Tomorrow Podcast, The Lituation Room, DC on HBO Max Podcast, Stargirl Podcast, Superman and Lois Radio, Green Lantern Podcast, The Sandman Podcast, DC TV After Dark, and Justice League Dark Podcast.
And since this Supergirl Radio episode is all about villains, we have some villain designs in the DC TV Podcast TeePublic store that we would love to suggest.
Yeah, we got some Doomsday, we've got some General Zod, we got some Lex Luthor, we got Bizarro.
Lex Luthor looking very proud.
Yeah, we got Mixed-Pitalik in there, we've got Rain designs, we've got all of the Supergirl and Superman villains that you could want in the DC TV Podcast TeePublic store. So if you want to represent your favorite villain of the DC Comics universe, we've probably got some in there for you. Not only do we have Superman family villains, we've got Reverse Flash, we've got Grodd, we've got Deathstroke designs. So we've got all kinds of villains in there. So definitely check the DC TV Podcast TeePublic store out if you would like some new merch. All right, and we need to thank our legion of super sponsors for supporting the Supergirl Radio Patreon. These people are Michael, Ann, Marie, Yvonne, Quinn, Nicola, Abby, Miriam, Nicole, Brian, Ethan, Danny, Majuba, and Lingonberry. If you'd like to become a legion of super sponsor, you can visit patreon.com/Supergirl Radio. And we've got some fun things coming up. We are going to be releasing a Patreon exclusive on Morgan's trip to Italy, and we are also going to be doing a pilot pod on Doom Patrol. So I've been watching Doom Patrol. I got to catch up on seasons 3 and 4, but Morgan, I don't think I've ever seen Doom Patrol.
This was my dipping my toe into the Doom Patrol pond.
So we are aiming to do a pilot pod every month. So if you're interested in our takes on the first episodes of TV shows, maybe not the rest of the episodes, but just the first one,
not the rest, but
we will be doing that on the Supergirl Radio Patreon. So if you want to check me out, you can find me on some different several platforms. I'm on a platform called Vero True Social. At my username there is @𝙎𝙪𝙥𝙾. You can find out what I'm reading or listening to or watching there. I also have a personal Instagram account @the_𝙎𝙪𝙥𝙾, where I post the occasional picture of there. I also have a personal YouTube channel, which I've been neglecting lately, but hopefully in November I can get back to creating content for that. But you can find me over at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. I might start doing Andy Babacton and I talked about doing live stream episodes about the Rebel Moon comics that are going to be coming out.
I did see that
based on the Zack Snyder Rebel Moon feature film series, I guess, franchise on Netflix that will be coming out starting in December. So we may do a series of episodes on those comics. So be checking us out over there. I also have a travel blog that I've neglected for several months now at Oasis Broom. If you'd like to follow me over there, hopeful months, I'll be getting to some more travel stuff on that account. If you would like to keep in touch with places or keep in touch with me and where I've been and things that I've seen.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm @Mojotastic. And you can also find me as a co-host on the Legendary Ladies podcast, where all month in October, we've been doing our spooky sessions, which is our spooky season picks, talking about horror movies, listing out our top 5 horror movies of all time, and also visiting some fun horror movies like You're Next, Bride of Chucky, and this week we are doing Crimson Peak, which is gothic, little gothic horror in there. So if you are in the mood to put something spooky on or hear some people talk about some spooky stuff for spooky season, you should come check us out. You can find us on a podcast at the Legendary Ladies podcast.com. You can also find us on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter at legends_podcast, but you can also find us on YouTube, youtube.com / @the Legendary Ladies.
I need to put all of those URLs on the graphic for the live streams for you. And I also
I'm
need
amazed
to
I
change
ever remember them.
I also need to change out all my uses of Twitter to X, even though everybody still calls it Twitter. I guess
Yeah.
it could change out that logo.
You changed it in the graphic. I feel like that's more than it deserves.
And would you know, I met somebody today. We were talking about things that we're scared of, and I mentioned I have an ET phobia.
I remember
will
that.
not watch the Steven Spielberg ET film if I don't have to. ET the shot where ET is in the closet with all the stuffed animals and it just like pans over. Nope. And the some of the scenes where he's like ET is dying and he's white and gross. I can't handle it. But so what in this discussion, talking about that today, I found somebody who is afraid of Muppets.
What?
Has like a Muppet thing where like she won't watch Muppets, thinks Muppets are weird and don't want to watch them. And I was like,
that's crazy.
I was like, I'm going to fix you. I'm going to make you love Muppets.
We can change this. We can change you.
So scary things are, I guess, different for everybody, what everybody is scared of. But I'm glad that you can stomach that stuff because I sure cannot. So that is very interesting. I'm sure those episodes are great. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Supergirl Radio. But until next time, I'm still Rebecca Johnson.
And I'm still Morgan Glennon. And remember, without the villain to define the hero, you don't have a hero.
McGurk, I love
Not
typing.
mess with my Google Docs, Meeksy.
Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira. I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is 𝙎𝙬 𝙘𝙚 boardroom or ballroom because
She looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
no.
Helen Slater here. It's so fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
Yeah!